And those who have not seen the previous episodes of Zombie City, check the description box.
Hey guys, welcome to Zombie City Episode 5.
Someone's rifle
Please
clicked.
like and
It was
subscribe
most
to our
likely the
channel.
sound of a machine gun. None of them had a machine gun. So who was firing the machine gun? A grenade blast went off in the closed room with a loud sound. Meanwhile, the clicking sound continued. Someone had loaded the machine gun and pressed the trigger. It was firing non-stop now. The two zombies on top of Shakib were hit in the head by machine gun bullets. They fell to the side. Shakib sat up. Almost all the zombies were dead. The few that were still there were also killed by machine gun bullets. No one was shooting inside them. Everyone was standing in shock. They looked at each other. No one understood anything. Shakib looked at the washroom in the corner. The washroom door was slightly ajar. The machine gun barrel was sticking out through that gap. That meant the shots had been fired from there all along. The one who fired the shot was there. Seeing Shakib, the others also looked in that direction. They saw the same thing. But who was inside? A few tense moments passed. The door of the washroom opened completely. A young boy dressed in military uniform came out. He had a strange resemblance to James Roy. The same building. His hair was also gray. His nose, eyes, lips, everything was the same. He was thin and handsome like Roy, only a little younger. Luke's age, 22 or 23. Besides, there was no way to tell Roy and this boy apart. Roy was the first to move. He ran to the boy. He hugged him. "Oh, Henry," Roy said in an emotional voice. "Are you still alive?" James Henry patted his brother on the back. He smiled softly and said, "I thought you were the ones who died." "No, brother, we didn't die." Meanwhile, they were standing near the two brothers. "I can see that." Henry's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Shakib. He also looked at Luke and Larry one by one. "Who are they? They weren't in this building. Where did they come from?" "They came from America," Roy said. He pointed to Larry and Luke. "They are two U.S. Air Force pilots." Henry was surprised. "Why are they here?" The whole matter was explained to Henry. Henry was shocked to hear everything. His jaw dropped in surprise. It was hard to believe their words. Henry was introduced to them, especially Shakib, Larry, and Luke. The others knew him. Roy's younger brother, James Henry, second lieutenant in the British military. They shook hands with Henry. They also introduced themselves. Henry told his story of survival. "When I fell behind you guys, I thought I was going to die," he started to say. "If one of us hadn't done this, we would all have died. I took the responsibility. But strangely, an unusual power came into my body. I not only held back the zombies, but I also survived. Finally, I entered the washroom. Later, the number of zombies kept increasing. I didn't get any chance to get out. I've been sitting there ever since. A little while ago, I heard the sound of gunfire and opened the door and looked outside. I looked and saw you. It was a little late to load the machine gun. By then, you were already in the hands of the zombies. You know what happened next. I thought you were finished when you went inside to stop the zombies," Christina said as Henry stopped. "I never dreamed I would find you again." Roy hugged his brother again. He cried again. An emotional atmosphere was created. "It's not right for us to stay here," Shakib said. "The zombies could come back at any time." "Yes, you're right." Everyone agreed. In short, Henry was told about their plan. "Whose head did the plan come from?" Henry asked. "It came from his head," Christina said, pointing to Shakib. Henry patted Shakib on the shoulder. "Intelligent boy." They got up again. They started going down the stairs. They encountered many more zombies on the stairs. But there was no problem. They quickly came down to the 5th floor. This floor was a shopping mall, but they didn't go inside. The stairs went down by the side. Although there were many zombies on the stairs, they had another fight with them. Then they came down to the 4th floor. Here is also a shopping mall. This time they have to go inside. The stairs here are also on the other side, like the 6th floor. They have to cross this floor. The main door was closed. They had closed them when they went up. But there is no key. They had to break the lock by shooting. They went inside. The shopping mall is here. All the beautiful clothes are scattered all over the floor. Like every floor, here too there is blood splattered. There are also lumps of rotten meat. Hundreds of insects are crawling on it. Horrible. They looked around cautiously. No, there are no zombies. Have the guys grown wise? They don't come forward at first. They will attack again suddenly. But even after a long time, they didn't see any zombies. There were probably no zombies on this floor. Even then, they remained alert. They kept moving forward, skipping over the clothes, shelves, and cupboards scattered on the floor. Shakib stopped as soon as his eyes fell on a shelf on the right. This time, no one noticed him because he was behind. Everyone moved forward, leaving him behind. On the shelf, a small, beautiful child was sitting opposite him. The child was most likely a girl. The big, golden hair hinted at that. Judging by her build, she might be 7 or 8 years old. It could be less. Shakib moved toward it. He approached the girl and called her softly, "Hey, honey, are you okay?" There was no response from the girl. She didn't even turn around and look at him. Shakib called again, this time a little louder. "Hey, can't you hear me? Are you okay?" The girl stirred. This time she must have heard. Shakib stared at it with deep interest. At one point, the girl turned to look at him. Shakib was prepared for all kinds of situations here in this zombie city. However, seeing the little beautiful girl, he went to a beautiful world for a few moments where there were no zombies. There were only healthy, normal people, beautiful little children like this girl. So he could not bear the scene. His body was confused. His head started to spin. His vision became blurry. The girl's face was missing. Naked jaws, bones, and rotten flesh were sticking out. Strange insects were crawling there. Shakib was in great shock at this situation. His voice could not come out. Meanwhile, the scary-looking girl jumped at him from the shelf. Shakib did not get a chance to move away. When he came, he did not move. It was as if he was lost in a strange trance. He could not understand anything. The girl landed on top of his head. He hugged his neck with both hands. The skinless, fleshless mouth was brought close to his throat, and Shakib felt the unpleasant touch of the disgusting insects that were chirping. After a while, Larry noticed that Shakib was not with them. He told the others. Everyone stopped. He looked around and started looking for Shakib, but he couldn't find him. Where had the boy gone in all this time? Luke was about to call out Shakib's name, and then he saw the scene. He froze in fear. His voice could not come out. A small zombie was holding Shakib's neck with both hands. It was about to bite him. But the strange thing was that Shakib was not trying to stop him. He was standing quietly, but he had a pistol in his hand. What happened to the boy? Luke didn't hesitate a moment. He aimed at the zombie's head and fired, but he missed. If it had been a little more, the bullet would have hit Shakib's head. At that moment, Henry's AK-47 roared. The zombie's skull flew off. Shakib fell to the floor. Everyone ran to him. Christina grabbed his hand and pulled him up. "Are you okay?" After a while, Shakib shook his head. It was as if he came out of a daze. "I'm okay." He was shocked to see the headless body of the little zombie lying next to him. I'm okay?" His throat tightened in fear. They looked at each other. They understood that Shakib was in a great shock. Christina approached him. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Yes, you're okay. Everything is okay." Captain Morgan gestured for Roy to go to Shakib. Roy understood the gesture. He asked him to check if Shakib had any wounds anywhere. Roy approached Shakib. He pretended to pat his shoulder and examined his neck and shoulders. He shook his head with satisfaction when he saw no wounds. Luke and Larry, both of them knew Shakib very well. They have a very good idea about Shakib's mental strength. They were quite surprised to see Shakib in such a state. The boy's nerves are very strong. He doesn't break easily. But what happened to him now? Something must have happened to the boy, Larry thought to himself. He walked towards Shakib. He put his hand on his shoulder. Shakib looked at Larry. What a look of confusion in his eyes. Larry smiled. He gently patted his shoulder. Keeping the smile on his lips, he said, "Everything is fine. We are all fine. Nothing happened to anyone." Shakib didn't say anything in response. He looked at everyone one by one. Christina was looking at him with a smile on her lips. She looked incredibly beautiful. Why is this girl so beautiful? Roy, Henry, and Larry also smiled. However, a slight crease was clearly visible between his eyebrows. Captain Morgan's smile could not hide the crease between his eyebrows and the roughness of his face. George and Lassie are looking at him curiously. Lassie looks much younger than her age. How enchanting. Maybe she will be as beautiful as Christina when she grows up. She is looking at him with a smile. There is a strange feeling inside Shakib's head. He himself does not understand what has happened to him. It seems that someone is trying to take control of his brain, but for some reason he cannot. Suddenly, Shakib sits down, holding his head with both hands. It seems that his head is in a lot of pain. Christina and Larry immediately sit down next to him. Luke also sits down later. Christina holds his shoulder with both hands. "Does it feel bad? Do you want to drink water?" After a while, Shakib shakes his head. "Do you want to drink water?" Christina quickly takes the water bottle out of her pocket, unscrews the cap, and holds it to his mouth. Shakib takes the bottle from Christina's hand and drinks half of the water from the bottle. Then he sits for a while. He feels that something heavy is slowly being removed from his head. At some point, everything moved. Shakib returned to his previous state. He stood up. He was silent for a moment. Slowly, he understood the matter. He looked at everyone with normal eyes. Everyone was looking at him with curious eyes. Christina put her hand on his shoulder again. "Are you okay?" Shakib shook his head. "I'm okay now." "What happened to you?" Larry asked. "I don't know." Shakib shook his head. "I saw the girl." He pointed to the little zombie lying next to him. "Then I don't understand what happened to me. Everything is okay now." Then there's no point in delaying any longer." Larry turned to the others. "Let's go, everyone." Everyone started moving again. This time, Shakib was put in the middle. Christina stayed by his side. Without any danger, they approached the stairs. As soon as they stepped on the stairs, a dozen zombies attacked. Everyone's rifles roared together. All the zombies died. They safely descended to the 3rd floor. This floor was the weapons showroom. Their first target was to come here. They have arrived, but there is more work to do. They haven't gone inside yet. No one knows what danger is hidden inside. As usual, the main door was closed. Morgan and Larry, like every time, went to stand in front of the door. They tried to listen to the sounds on the other side with their ears. The result was the same. Nothing could be heard. Once inside, the zombies would be seen. After waiting a moment, the door was broken down. Everyone entered. No zombies were seen inside, but there was evidence that they were or are still here. There were lumps of rotten meat scattered here and there on the floor. All sorts of disgusting insects were crawling on them. The clotted blood was sore. A couple of half-eaten corpses were also seen. Their condition was horrible. It was impossible to look at them. They walked past all this and moved forward. They entered the main showroom. Wherever the eye could see, only weapons and weapons. All weapons of different models and shapes. The responsibility of selecting weapons fell on Larry, Roy, Henry, and Christina. George was given to help them. The captain told them to take the most powerful and effective weapons. Meanwhile, the rest were given the responsibility of guarding. One by one, they went in each direction. The captain went forward. He would look in that direction. Luke went to the back. Shakib and Lassie stayed together. The responsibility of watching the alley on the right fell on them. For some strange reason, Lassie was quite happy to be close to Shakib. She kept looking at Shakib, trying to stand next to him. Above all, trying to attract his attention. Meanwhile, Shakib was feeling quite embarrassed by Lassie's behavior. He was getting restless. Captain Morgan moved forward a little while walking. Suddenly, he saw something and stopped. Even after seeing his brother Ron dressed in military uniform from behind, he didn't have to rush at all to recognize him. Ron was sitting in the opposite direction, his head down, doing something. Morgan moved a little closer. He said in a low voice, "Ron, are you okay?" There was no response from the other side. Morgan called again, this time a little louder. "Ron, are you okay?" Ron looked back. Even Morgan, who had strong nerves, couldn't bear this strangeness of his brother. Ron was sitting and eating a corpse. The corpse's rotten flesh, blood, pus were stuck to his face. Morgan blinked for a moment at this sight, and that's when he made the mistake. Within a moment, the zombie in his prime jumped on Morgan. Morgan didn't get a chance to save himself or stop him. Henry turned back to say something to Captain Morgan, but he was quite surprised not to see Morgan there. "Captain?" he called out in a low voice, but there was no response from Captain Morgan. "Where has the captain gone? Haven't you gotten into any danger?" Henry was a little worried, but he put the thought aside for a moment. When he thought, the captain may have moved forward, that's why he may not be hearing his call. Henry also moved forward. He started calling Captain Morgan in a low voice. After moving a little far, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. He stopped for a moment. Then he fired. His hand was shaking and he missed the target. This time he fired slowly. 2 in a row. Both bullets hit the zombie's head. He fell to his side. Meanwhile, the captain was lying on his back, panting with exertion. He was tired from fighting the giant Ron-like zombie for so long. Henry went to Captain Morgan and sat down. "Captain, are you okay?" Morgan shook his head. He wiped the blood from his neck with his hand. Henry frowned at that. Meanwhile, the others also came to the sound of gunshots. After a while, the captain sat up. He was silent for a moment. He looked at Ron's body lying next to him. Then suddenly, he hugged Ron's body and started crying. The Shakibs could not understand what was happening. Christina told them that Ron was Captain Morgan's brother. They all consoled the captain. After a while, Captain Morgan became normal. He stood up. They had come without weapons. They again stepped forward to go to their work. And then someone's rifle rang out. They looked at each other. "Everyone is here." No one fired. So where did the rifle crackle come from? Who fired the shot? They were quite surprised, and at the same time, surprised. The sound came again, the sound of firing. The captain and Roy listened with their ears erect. Finally, Roy mumbled, "Firing from a Stein gun." Morgan shook his head up and down. "You got it right, that's the Stein gun. But who's firing? Who?" No one could answer. "The sound is coming from that side." Larry raised his hand and pointed to the left. Everyone agreed. The sound was coming from the left. They went that way carefully. There are several alleys here, like small patterns. Each alley is filled with large cabinets full of all the weapons. The patterns are made up of these cabinets. Captain Morgan, Roy, and Christina are in the front. The children are in the middle. Henry, Luke, and Larry behind them. They are moving carefully. From here, there is the sound of firing. They came to a stand next to a cupboard. First, Morgan peeked in. There was nothing on the other side. Seeing nothing, he entered the alley. The others followed him. Christina and Roy went next to Morgan. Suddenly, Roy pushed Christina aside. He also sat down. Immediately after that, the firing started, randomly. The bullets hit the wall right where Christina was. Morgan saw the two huge zombies. Shakib saw them too. They were standing next to a cupboard. Both of them had stun guns in their hands. They were occasionally pressing the trigger. The firing started immediately. Morgan opened fire without a moment's delay. The skulls of the two zombies were blown off by the powerful bullets of the M16. Meanwhile, Roy and Christina had stood up by then. Christina thanked Roy for saving her life. Roy accepted it with a smile. They walked towards the zombies. "I don't understand one thing," Henry said. "These guys are zombies," he pointed to the zombies lying on the floor. "So how did they fire?" Shakib answered. He said, "Before they became zombies, they had weapons in their hands, and they had to load them. Later, they didn't have to use their brains to load them. Since they had fingers on the trigger, they just moved their fingers, and they fired automatically." When Shakib finished speaking, Henry looked at him for a moment. Then, smiling, he patted his shoulder and said, "You really are a genius." "I understood that a long time ago," Christina said with a smile. "I understood even longer," Larry added. "Everyone stop," Luke said, raising both hands. Everyone stopped. He looked at Luke with interest. "He's a genius," Luke pointed at Shakib. "I was the first to understand that." Everyone laughed at Luke's words. Even Captain Morgan laughed. Shakib saw a few drops of blood coming out of a small wound in his throat in the middle of his laughter. Morgan immediately wiped it away with his hand. Check the description to see other episodes of Zombie City.